Hello everyone, welcome to our online presentation. I'm Alex Homfray, Director of Strategic Development at Handel Hendrix.
Hi, I'm Claire Davies. I'm the Deputy Director and Curator at Handel Hendrix.
Hi, I'm Sean Doherty. I'm the Commercial and Marketing Manager at Handel Hendrix.
Okay, now if you haven't been to visit Handel Hendrix, it comprises two small historic properties in Mayfair in the heart of London. We present the upper floors of the house where the Baroque composer Handel lived for 36 years and composed Messiah, as well as many other celebrated works. And next door, we present Jimi Hendrix's flat where he lived at the height of his fame, and which rather poignantly he referred to as his first real home. As we like to say, there's so much genius in so small a space. The properties are run, they're open to the public as an accredited museum run by an independent charity that has a loyal network of supporters. And we also program a series of concerts, learning and events, mainly on site, but also occasionally off site. Can we have the next slide? And our story for the purposes of this presentation begins in late 2016. Which had been a very big year for Handel Hendrix. At the start of the year, in February, the Hendrix Flat had opened after a major HLF supported capital project, which had successfully brought in a new audience of Hendrix fans into the building. But there was also a change of director, which prompted a full review of all operations in order to keep pushing forwards over the next 10 years. And ultimately, the goal within these 10 years was to complete the presentation of Handel's house and to transform it to match the high quality of the successful new Hendrix spaces. So to put the strategy together, which was led by me, we benchmarked against all peer venues, we surveyed our visitors and held focus groups with visitors and educators, and we did a top to bottom review of all operations. And what we concluded from that was that at that moment in 2016, buoyed by the opening of the Hendrix space, we were pretty popular, doing well, with an enduringly high spend per visit for a relatively small historic property. Against that, though, we were aware that our visitor pool was relatively narrow. We were mainly attracting ardent Hendrix fans or Handel fans. The profile of both of those sets of fans, many of them were older. And although, we had a new influx of Hendrix fans, we'd also tracked through our visitor surveys the fact that our Handel fans, who'd previously been extremely loyal repeat visitors, those visits were starting to dwindle. We also were very well aware that the presentation of Handel displays and the collection behind it were not matching the new Hendrix spaces. At that point, we were still supported by the HLF to complete a very comprehensive activity plan program, but we knew that support would only continue for a limited period. So we had planned for a post-HLF and post-activity plan period. We were also at that point financially dependent on the rent we got from leasing out the lower floors of Handel's house to a retail tenant. So we took all of those things, we thought about the next 10 years, and really we realised that our future direction was characterised by one, we would have to plan for a consolidation over the medium term, a consolidation of our staff, of activities and income, as we anticipated a further diminishing of visits following the opening year excitement in 2016. But then we wanted to long-term be able to grow again as we reviewed the Handel presentation. We thought that we would have a period before any capital project was possible, a period where we could experiment and innovate and really find our own theatrical way to present the heritage and the stories of our two personalities. And finally, we were well aware that in order to expand, to bring those lower floors of Handel's house into the visitor experience, we would have to evolve our business model So we have a 5-year period of trying to build up a hires and events business, and also to build an endowment that could provide income that would compensate for the lost rent. So, Claire, I'd like to bring you in now. Do you want to give us a sense of how visitors responded to the new Hendrix Flat in 2016?
Yeah, so we conducted many surveys, both in person and online, to gather visitors' responses, and they were overwhelmingly positive. However, the success of this project exposed a lot of issues with the display and interpretation of Handel's house, which was somewhat unchanged since its opening in 2001. The Hendrix Flat was full of ephemera and intimate detail, whilst Handel's house was comparatively bare and didn't appear to give any sense of life. The two pictures on the slide illustrate this contrast. To give you some examples of the feedback we received, in November 2016, one visitor wrote, "4 dingy rooms with little about Handel and almost nothing connected with him. Quite an interesting exhibition about an 18th century tenor, under-curated." And later on in March 2017, another visitor wrote, "The Handel rooms are interesting, but lack any atmosphere. The Hendrix section, on the other hand, simply oozes atmosphere and character."
Okay, so we were hearing, a very positive response to the new Hendrix spaces, but a negative response to the Handel's presentation of Handel's rooms.
Right.
Why was that? How was Handel's house presented at that point?
Well, the curation of the house was structured around 4 themes, with each of the 4 historic rooms dedicated to each theme. So portraits of Handel and his contemporaries were used to illustrate the narrative, with furniture subtly placed to give a light suggestion of the purpose of each room. This museum-like method of presenting the house worked very well for many years, and especially to an audience of dedicated Handel fans. For the Hendrix Flat, we had a lot of historical evidence to go by, most notably several photographs of Hendrix posing in the flat. So it was fairly straightforward to recreate. But conversely, there is some evidence of how Handel lived and what items he had in his house, but it involves piecing together lots of different sources and drawing conclusions that could be subject to a level of debate. So it's kind of understandable that a more museum style was adopted when it first opened. And then there's exhibition spaces in the corresponding rooms of 23. And they were dedicated to temporary exhibitions that highlighted specific moments in Handel's life and career, as well as the stories of people he interacted with, some of which are extremely successful, and especially in those early years. However, when we opened the Hendrix Flat as a faithfully restored historic space, packed with ephemera and atmosphere, and to a completely different audience, visitors began to remark on the contrast between the two houses and what it was like, and what it was that they were taking away even. So, a lot from Hendrix and very little from Handel. The temporary exhibition that was hung in 2016 was about a tenor whom Handel had worked with, and it was extremely detailed, unlike our Handel displays. So visitors were leaving with much more knowledge about the tenor than they were about Handel himself.
Okay, so then obviously, we then entered into our new 10-year strategy period, where we said we would use the next few years to experiment and innovate and find an improved way and really our own unique way to present the heritage. How did you respond to some of the visitor comments when you were thinking about that?
Well, firstly, before we officially opened the Hendrix Flat, I had an inkling that perhaps Handel's house might seem a little bare in contrast to Hendrix's flat, but I understood and respected the reasons why it was the way that it was. And to be honest, we were so focused on all things Hendrix, I don't think any of us were really prepared to add any scrutiny of the Handel experience to our workload. And I was also quite attached to the temporary exhibition programme and thoroughly enjoyed working on them. In reality, though, the exhibitions weren't pulling in the extra visitor numbers that they were supposed to, and they were extremely costly. So obviously, the use of the exhibition spaces needed to be addressed. In fact, our audiences told us that they liked the didactic Hendrix exhibition that introduced them to or reminded them of Hendrix's music and his life in London, and they were calling out for a similar treatment of the Handel story. There's a comment from August 2016 that sums this up, which reads, I mainly came for the Handel portion of the museum and found the Hendrix portion of the museum to be far more interesting. Please tell us more about the music history and extraordinary life and talent of this composer. Handel deserves far more. If you are a Hendrix fan, then the visit will be worth it for you. So with regard to those historic spaces, obviously we had to take into account the fact that the Hendrix Flat is made up of mostly reproduction items. So the space is always going to be considerably more relaxed and tactile at a level that an 18th century space dressed with 300-year-old objects is never going to reach. However, there were plenty of methods for us to consider to update the experience without compromising on historical accuracy and collection care. So overall, the main objective was clear: make Handel's house feel like an historic house that gives a sense of the domestic and enterprising home that it was, so that visitors can step through the door and back into an exciting moment in time, as they are able to in Hendrix's flat.
Okay, so do you want to just talk us through a few examples of the interventions you made in order to create more a sense of Handel's home?
Definitely. So we ended up identifying 3 ways that we could improve the Handel experience. Firstly, we changed the theme of each room to match its domestic purpose. And this was accompanied by a short room guide for a more literal narrative and for the visitors to take away with them. And so we also moved around some pictures and furniture to better reflect those domestic purposes. Secondly, we chose to dress the rooms with a light layer of relevant ephemera. And this was really simple and didn't require much research. You know, our knowledge of the 18th century completely, supported this. So, candlesticks with burnt down candles, paper and quills, items of clothing, books. And then to sort of further contextualise the ephemera, we commissioned new display cases that look like 18th century furniture. My favourite is a writing desk, and in it I can display Handel's handwritten letters and annotated books. So they dress the room, it gives a sense of atmosphere, protects a delicate and invaluable artefact, and it gets important pieces of our collection out there. And then the third option that we deployed was we hung 2 new exhibitions, but they were permanent exhibitions, and they introduced visitors to Handel's music and his life in London. So one is centred around a 1740s map that picks out all the places that Handel visited and worked and where his friends and colleagues lived. And then the music exhibition is complete with a video of musicians performing in Handel's music room to really contextualise it. Basically, we ended up with a much more enriched Handel experience that allowed visitors a much more empathetic and inspiring sense of Handel's life and career. And it was brilliant to see how visitors' comments changed after this, who now seemed satisfied that the Handel rooms had character and atmosphere.
Great. So this, relatively light refresh was pretty effective in terms of visitor perceptions. I'm sure people will be interested to know, what the budget was for the refresh.
Yeah, so previously we had a new temporary exhibition roughly every 6 months, and that had a budget of around £15,000, which, as many people watching will know, does not go very far when you take into account the cost of design and construction and, the transporting of loans, which is probably the most costly part. So bear that in mind. So we spent around £30,000 on updating Handel's house. So that is for the cost of 2 temporary exhibitions. We were able to make enough simple changes to the historic rooms to respond to visitor feedback and include 2 semi-permanent exhibitions. We had to put in the funds for this up front, of course, but this move was therefore in line with our post-capital project strategy to streamline the operating budget in preparation for our next capital project to open Handel's ground floor and basement, which will really transform the experience of Handel's house.
Great, thank you, Claire. I want to bring Sean in now. And Sean, again, going back to 2016, of course, the physical spaces in the house changed considerably, but the marketing also changed. And do you want to talk us through that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you can imagine we went from being Handel House to Handel and Hendrix in London. So the scope of who we are as an organisation completely changed, and so therefore, our marketing had to change with that. So over the last kind of three or so years, I've really focused all the marketing and the marketing spend much more towards digital avenues, because we just saw that the Hendrix side of the museum, that was completely necessary, because there's this new audience that we needed to reach, and it was kind of self-evident that that's an audience that were much more digitally savvy, and that we'd need to use these kinds of tools. As well as that, there was a need for a kind of a much more efficient marketing spend. So after the HLF funding that we had ended, we needed to be much more efficient with how we spent the marketing budget. And I quickly realized that through digital tools you can reach far more people by spending less. So the per head spend is much less with digital techniques. So yeah, just talking through some of the things that we focused on. We started using paid social. I think before 2016, the organization had social media. Well, it had Facebook and Twitter, didn't have an Instagram account, but had never really used social media or like advertised through it. Had only done kind of free posting. So we focused on that. We've created an Instagram account in 2016, now has around 6,000 followers. And yeah, just we've focused on Google ads. So we've got an ad grant. I'm sure a lot of the organizations out there already know this, but if you're a registered charity in the UK, you can effectively get as much free advertising on Google as you want, which has been invaluable to us. We've created these kind of banner adverts, so you can see on the right hand side these kind of illustrated digital ads that we've used on various websites, which I think it can be quite intimidating if you're not au fait with a lot of digital techniques to kind of create something like this, but actually they can be really simply created and very cheaply created. So my advice for any small organizations out there with really small marketing budgets, we've done this, we've created a whole suite of digital adverts that we can use, and on really, really small budgets. So just for a bit of context, the organization's entire marketing budget, annual marketing budget, is around £17,000. And we spend around a third of that, so around £5,000 a year on digital techniques. So we're not talking huge numbers here, but you can do quite amazing things. And just for another bit of context, our audience is around 30,000 across all our social media accounts and other digital audiences. So yeah, that's kind of more than doubled over the last 3 years. So it's really paid dividends.
That's fantastic, Sean. But of course, we still do use print selectively, don't we? Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've focused on digital, but it's not 100% by any means. We still use all the traditional more traditional avenues that we'd always have used, but we've kind of updated it. And it's been interesting how focusing on digital has influenced the more traditional techniques as well. So, for instance, here you can see some of the redesigned leaflets that we've created. So we kind of realized through the much more targeted advertising that we're using online that the same should be done through print marketing as well. So here you can see, for instance, we decided that it kind of makes sense for us that our potential audience can be split into three. So the first one is Handel Hendrix in London. So that's putting both together and attracting an audience of people who are interested in the fact that these two very disparate musical figures can be experienced in the same place and live next door to each other, and how amazing that is. And then splitting them in two. So having one that focuses solely on Hendrix and one that focuses on Handel. Not that we're ignoring either side of the museum, but just that it's a much more targeted message that we can put out there. And that's really worked for us. So, for instance, something that we've used really successfully is kind of hand-to-hand leaflet distribution. So rather than paying to have thousands of leaflets put in racks around London, we can really target specific concerts. So if there's a Handel opera happening in the Royal Opera House, we can have people outside with Handel specific leaflets. If there's, a big rock concert happening in Hyde Park, we can have Hendrix specific leaflets. Rather than targeting the general Londoner, we're now making sure that our leaflets are going to exactly the audience that we know are going to visit the museum. So again, it's been about a kind of a process of efficiency and making sure we get that return on investment, because our budgets are really limited.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Sean. And of course, another area in which we have been innovating and has really come along over the last few years is our event programming. Sean, do you want to just give us an overview of our events at present? Yeah,
absolutely. So kind of just as an overview, we have Baroque concerts every week, sometimes twice a week. Obviously, you mainly focusing on Handel's music. We have guided tours, we have guitar lessons, the occasional talk. And then the kind of where we really splash out and put a lot of resource and a lot of time towards is our Friday Lates program. And this is something we've built over the last 3 years. So I think, we didn't really do it before we became Handel and Hendrix in London. Now it's a really big part of who we are. Okay.
Do you want to just sort of give us an outline of how lates tend to work, and also I think what it costs, what we're putting in terms of budget and staff time.
So I mean, in general, I'll just talk through what our lates look like and feel like. We're looking at a capacity of around 100 to 150 people, depending on how much of the house we have open. And we have different things happening throughout the house, so different things in each room. If you can imagine, for anyone who hasn't visited, it's two, historic houses, small historic houses, Georgian townhouses. So each room has a maximum capacity of something like, 20 to 30 people. So we can't have any one big thing happening. So it's all about having different activities happening in each room, and spreading people out throughout the house. And this is something that we've absolutely had to kind of start small and really test and experiment. So you can imagine in 2016 when we kind of came up with this concept and went with it, I think we started at 50 people with certain bits of the house open. Then we moved it to 75, then 100, and now we're selling 150 tickets. So my advice for anyone thinking of doing this is really start small, test, see what works. And for us, we've really kind of perfected a formula now that we know works, we know creates an amazing event. Just as an example, we've sold 100% of the tickets for our Hendrix Lates in 4 years. So we've literally sold out every single one of these. I think by making them kind of unique and only doing 5 or 6 a year, we're really kind of, it's been a huge success.
Okay, and what's the budget for each event approximately?
So kind of now we tend to spend around £1,500 on each event, and you're looking at a revenue of around 2,500 to 3,500. So we're making kind of 30-40% profit on this each time, which obviously is great. They're profitable, but there's also a lot of staff time spent on that. So we involve the whole staff team in the process, which is viewed as just a really positive thing for the organisation, and can get everyone involved in kind of different aspects of the job. But it's been a real kind of learning experience for me to be able to manage the teams for these events, and also for other people to kind of our front of house team to really take on more responsibility. And it's been a really had a really positive impact on kind of team morale and team building, and being able to delegate out tasks to different members of the team. And I think, yeah, we view that as a real strength now, that we have this huge skill set around, you know, this small team that we have. You know, it's 7 or 8 people who work at Handel Hendrix in London and on these events. But we've now built up a real skill set among these people. So we're kind of like experts in running lates now, which is amazing.
Fantastic. And now let's talk a bit about filming and photography and the important role those have played in terms of publicising Handel and Hendrix.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, if you imagine that, yeah, we have these limited budgets, and we can't spend what other organisations spend on marketing. So filming and photography has been a massively successful avenue for us. So just, yeah, if you can look at some of these photos, we've had BBC documentaries, we've commissioned our own kind of series of live sessions in Jimi Hendrix's bedroom. We've had fashion shoots, all sorts. And that's been an amazing way of raising awareness for us as an organisation. But I guess what I would say is, as my advice to other organisations, is that you have to be as flexible as possible with this. So how it's worked for us is that we charge some people to use the space. So it's actually a way of generating revenue. But sometimes we have to make the call that it's such a great project, or it's such a great awareness raising tool, that we can offer serious discounts or offer the space for free if we know that we're getting the publicity out of it that we want, and it's going to bring people into the museum who are going to buy tickets and all the rest of it. So yeah, that's something that's really worked for us, is being flexible enough to say, okay, on this project we're going to charge, on another project maybe we won't, and really being flexible enough to make that work. Yeah.
Fantastic. And now, of course, you know, we are broadcasting this during the period of lockdown. The properties are closed.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about how you're maintaining momentum and visitor engagement?
Yeah, obviously. Well, I mean, it's a massive challenge, but if we look at some of this film and photography work that we've done, it's really given us this huge library of amazing resources to fall back on. So yeah, we're working on kind of new digital things, but to keep things ticking over, it's been great to just go back to this kind of archive, this library of great photography and film that's out there, and keep our audience engaged while we work on creating new resources as well. So yeah, it's really paid dividends, all this focus on digital content.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sean. And of course, all of this activity that we've been introducing and developing over the last few years is all building up momentum towards our next capital project, our final capital project, which we call the Hallelujah Project. This is going to be a £2.2 million project that will finally present all of Handel's house, including the lower floors, which are currently leased to our retail tenant. We're going to be able to present all of Handel's house as far as possible, as it would have been whilst Handel was there. It's also an opportunity for us to completely rework interpretation, building on the new approaches and techniques that Claire has already been introducing into the spaces. And so we see the opportunity for new displays which really bring to life Handel's musical palette and his musical innovations, his compositional process, his wonderful London network and his London social life, but also on a smaller scale, you know, the domestic life of this gentleman's Georgian residence. We think that we're going to be able to get something like 60% more public space as a result of the project, you know, which also gives us the opportunity to further develop the successful Hendrix experience with new displays, possibly looking at his innovations in guitar technique and guitar sound, so further consolidating the appeal of the Hendrix space. obviously, you know, this is a large and significant undertaking for the organisation. So we have been very careful to be as informed and remain informed as far as possible with what visitors want. We've been conducting surveys again with our visitors, but also just now with non-visitors. We've done some focus groups. There will be more coming along, and we're embarking on a process of engaging with local stakeholders. And you know, what we're concluding from all of that activity at this point is, one, our current visitors want this. You know, they are hungry for us to finally present all of Handel's house with reworked interpretation. Secondly, you know, we know that we can through this project, it will enable us to reach beyond the committed Handel fan and the committed Hendrix fan, to reach beyond them to perhaps what you might call a more general heritage interest visitor who knows they will be able to come for a unique, enthralling experience of two Georgian properties, but also inhabited by two incredible characters who contributed so much to the musical life of the city. We also, you know, are well aware that there are plans afoot to help to revitalise our neighbourhood of Mayfair by having a richer cultural offer that can sit alongside the existing retail offer and create more of a mixed-use destination. We are starting to engage with stakeholders because we very much want to be part of that process. And also through this, you know, we've discovered that we can successfully bring in a younger audience through our very unique events program, and our lates in particular. So the challenge for us as we go through this project is to try and recreate some of the excitement of events within the daytime experience, and again to help us expand our pool of visitors. Now, we're making good use of the current closed period in terms of progressing the planning for the project. We're currently at REBA stage 2. So basically, we have a good sense of what needs to go where and what it's going to cost. We're aiming to get planning permission by the end of this year, hopefully, continue our fundraising, and then reopen in 2023, which will be the 300th anniversary of Handel moving into the house, and indeed the house being built, as he was the first resident here. And you know, if we just go down one slide, just to finish off, you know, this is just a snapshot of our business model, and you'll see the process that I was describing earlier of managed contraction. You know, from the our financial year 2015 is because when our financial year starts, that is the year that Hendrix Flat opened, and you can see, you know, a relatively well-resourced organisation there, supported by HLF funds, quite a significant staff base, and quite a significant number of visitors at that point due to the excitement of Hendrix opening. And you can see how we've managed a contraction process over subsequent years. Footfall is slightly lower, but we've also managed to control our costs whilst improving the experience and innovating in the area of marketing and events in particular. And then you can see on the far right column how we are planning to prudently then build up the organisation again with a sustainable business model that is based on a slightly higher level of footfall and admissions income, though we've been very conservative there. Continuing of our current successful shop and fundraising operations, and also introducing a process that we've already started, introducing a successful strand of income from private hires, and also income from a £3 million endowment, which I'm pleased to say we have raised, and that is the first building block towards realising our ambitions for the future. So thank you very much for listening. Hope it was interesting. We are always delighted to meet up with our peers in the museum and heritage sector. So particularly if you haven't visited Handel Hendrix in London before, please do come down, let us know. We'll be glad to show you around and have a chat. Thanks.